So we're very happy to have David Graeber on the show, a friend from the Occupy movement. We met up again at the climate strike the other day on Friday. David's a professor of anthropology at London School of Economics, author of Debt, The First 5,000 Years, and his latest book, Bullshit Jobs.
Yes,
He'll tell us a little bit about that later.
Relevant to the present conversation, I think.
And Dave could probably tell us the fuller story, but I think he was Richard was telling me he's credited by one of the big magazines of creating the phrase "we are the 99%." But he said that was a collective effort as well. But maybe he could tell us a little bit about.
It wasn't a collective effort. It was about 5 of. Yeah, it was about 5 of us.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome, David. So welcome to Global Solutions Day. If you'd like to tell us, introduce a little bit and say anything you think we should be working on for solutions, or tell us about, also we'd love to hear about your latest book, Bullshit Jobs. And
Oh, the Bullshit Jobs. Well, the Bullshit Jobs book is actually relevant. Let me start with that. It's kind of a book that I never really intended to write. Santa Claus, hello. It was a book I never really intended to write. I wrote a little essay, almost as a joke for a friend of mine who was starting up a radical magazine strike, which at the time was spinning off International Times. And he said, why don't you write something provocative, something that nobody else would publish? And I thought, well, I keep meeting people. I don't really come from a professional background. I'm stuck in this academic world, surrounded by people who I don't completely understand what they actually do all day. And so I often find myself at parties saying, well, so what do you do? I'm an anthropologist. What do you do? And often they say, they're very apologetic. Well, nothing really. It's not very interesting. Or they say nothing. And so you assume they're just being modest. But sometimes if you pin them down, apply them with a few drinks, you discover that they actually mean it literally. They do nothing all day. They sit there playing computer games or waiting for the phone to ring, and maybe it rings once or twice a week, or they do something that they think is completely pointless. Like I reformat German tax forms into French ones so that these guys can get a tax rebate on. And a lot of people in marketing, a lot of people in PR also feel that, well, okay, my job does something, but I'm not sure it's something that really needs to be done or should be done. A lot of people are convinced that, if their jobs didn't exist, either it wouldn't make any difference at all, or the world might be a slightly better place. And it struck me that, what must that be like to wake up every morning and go to work and secretly believe that your job either doesn't need to exist or shouldn't exist? I mean, what does that do to the human soul? So I wrote this piece about it. And I also thought about the political implications. Maybe this explains why people resent teachers or auto workers so much. Why do they manage to get people angry at guys who actually do something useful for the world? And part of the reason why is because they do something useful for the world and everybody resents them. It's like, oh, you get to make cars, you get to teach children, and you want benefits and vacations? That's not fair. I have to sit there and pretend to work all day. I'm miserable. At least I should get perks. So I wrote a piece like that. And And it's kind of a joke, right? But it obviously was truer than I thought, because the thing just instantly went viral. Actually, it's funny because my partner at the time decided that would be the week it came out that we were going to go off to a cabin in a lake, on a lake and somewhere north of Montreal, and just bring a basket full of books and no internet. So I came back and I was like, what happened? The book had been, the essay had been translated into 15 different languages. It was going viral all over the world, and people were just going crazy with it. I was getting all these notes from people saying, yeah, I work in financial services. I've been passing it around. I've got this thing that's come over my desk 8 times just today. And I was like, so yeah, you guys really aren't working very hard, are you?
Wow. Yeah.
So okay. So then I figured I had to write the book. And one thing led to another. There were surveys, and they found out that I was shocked. I thought the numbers, okay, even with a crazy viral reaction, we're probably not talking more than 10, 20% of the population. But actually, when they started doing surveys, they found 37% of all people in this country felt their job made no significant contribution to anything.
It reminds me actually of a story. Danny, who helps the tech and produce this show, tells me the old communist days in Hungary. He said everyone had to have a job. So they created all these just random jobs of like, okay, you have to stand here and look after that door. You're the caretaker for the door. That's your job, or whatever it is, just so that they have full % employment. And
right.
Legal.
And it's well, that's the great mystery, because capitalism was supposed to be the exact opposite. You know, in the old socialist system, everybody's guaranteed a job and you couldn't get fired, basically. I mean, it was almost impossible. So, you know, they'd make up these silly jobs and people would pretend to do them. That was the big line, you know, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us, right? But capitalism was supposed to be the exact opposite. You know, it's lean and mean and efficient. It might make you miserable, but at least, like, you know, it deploys resources optimally. Well, not really at all, according to people who actually work in offices. You know, the people inside capitalist corporations, it's really interesting because the reaction to this aspect, because the people on top, the entrepreneurs, the people who really drank the Kool-Aid, they were like, but this is impossible. We live in a market system. You know, this would never happen. And then all the people who actually, you know, are the next tier down saying, and everybody knows this, you know. Bosses have no idea what's going on in their offices. Or
absolutely, well, it's a pyramidical system, isn't it? Really, you know that what at the top they know a lot less about what's going on further down. So, what about the solutions, David? I think we spoke briefly at the climate strike. We were remembering the old indie media days and. Lamenting some of the loss of that communication network. But the solutions, I mean, I think I interviewed someone earlier in the day from the Architects Declare, which was a group that was working on, there's music declares and culture declares and architects and engineers declare. These are different groups declaring for climate change. And his group, I think we're part of a UK Green Building Council. I think we're going to play them later. But you wanted to chat something about building and construction solutions, or any other solutions you want to share with people at the moment? You think we should focus on?
Yeah, this is interesting because I've been involved in the Extinction Rebellion Brain Trust, they call it, or brainstorming group. They wanted me to help get together a bunch of heterodox economists. So we've got all sorts of very interesting people, you know, very Steve Keen and Metaphor, but Marxists like James Speedway, a lot of people sort of weighing in on how we would actually get to zero carbon by 2025. And I started looking, you know, well, I'm not an economist. I'm an economic anthropologist, but macroeconomics is something I usually see from a distance. But you know, one thing that nobody seemed to be doing that I thought would be useful would be to do kind of an 18th Brumaire analysis, right? Marx, you know, when he was analyzing politics, he'd say which political factions really represent the interests of which sections of capitalism, and I was kind of surprised that nobody was doing this. Like, who are the forces that are blocking climate change? Obviously, the extractive industries, right? But we know that. But there's something more going on. And it first occurred to me, you know, who are creating the bullshit jobs, but also I realized one of the key factors is not just bullshit jobs. I mean, if we eliminate these 37%, right, of useless jobs, you know, that itself will be halfway there in terms of reducing carbon emissions, right? Just think about it. There's all these people like showing up for work, doing, you know, somebody has to heat those buildings, somebody has to construct those buildings, somebody has to keep them clean. So there's all these ancillary jobs, which are real jobs, doing real stuff, but in support of bullshit, right? Okay, so you know, that in itself would make a big difference. But what are the political forces stopping that? And I started looking into it. And I came to a great realization that the two sort of big forces, there's sort of finance and construction. And I realized this when I was thinking about Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. There had been an alliance between real estate and finance. That's why we had the subprime mortgage crisis. That's why traditionally they've been kind of a figurehead, because the real estate guys often supported social democratic policies because they wanted people to be able to afford houses, and they couldn't really export their product. Well, in London they can, but everywhere else they can. So that collapsed in 2008 with the big financial crash. The alliance between the real estate guys and the finance guys fell apart, and suddenly you have this election in America where you have Hillary Clinton, who's basically running as the candidate of Goldman Sachs, who's totally drunk with finance capital. And
I think the different Goldman Sachs were like the third contributor or something to Obama or something, and then the fifth contributor to the rival or whatever it is. In different, they seem to
they
put a certain amount of money into both candidates, and then whoever wins, they've got a candidate, shall we say?
But Trump presented a break. He was the finance tends to, you're right, give to both sides. But in this particular election, it was Hillary who was really representing finance, and Trump was this crazy construction guy. I'm going to build a wall. He's a real estate and construction guy, and he did this sort of classic corporatist thing. This was really big in mid-20th century. Both social democrats and fascists would say, well, employees in industry have common interests against finance. So, like Keynes talked about the euthanasia of the rentier class, and obviously fascists said they're all Jews, let's kill them. But either way, they had this line that, like, this kind of nativist line that employees in industry have common interests, and Trump did that. Obviously, he took the fascist version, and he said we need to. Well, this is the weird thing. Okay, in America, the empire and the financial system are really closely linked. This is something I learned when I was researching debt. That Treasury bond system is basically the tribute collection system for the American empire. So global finance and military hegemony are closely tied together. As a result, you have Hillary, she's running as the finance candidate and the empire candidate. She's saying, I'm going to attack Russia, all this kind of stuff. Whereas Trump, the fascist guy, is running as the peace candidate. And somebody analyzed his speeches, and he was the guy who was talking about peace and love, and not Hillary, and that's why he won. And he is kind of trying to dismantle the empire in his own half-assed way.
Well,
I don't know how
Cambridge Analytica using psyops developed in the Middle East to manipulate via Facebook people's canvassing for votes or something. I think that had something to do with it.
Everybody's doing that, yeah.
Everyone's doing that now, aren't they? Yeah, they're using Facebook to boost their campaigns. And
that's just politics now, yeah.
It is a strange world we live in now where they can turn up at your door.
Okay.
Pitch to how you want you to vote according to all these points on Facebook, but yeah,
I know. Well, we could go into that, but the art of political divisiveness and just putting yourself in at the exact point is well developed. But I was going someplace with this. I'm almost there, which is. Okay, so then I realized Hillary versus finance versus real estate. Well, those are kind of the two alignments you see over and over again, not just real estate, but construction. And so basically, the finance is supporting the bullshit jobs, but the real estate construction guys are supporting this sort of batshit construction. And the two things that are really like completely wasteful, destructive, both socially and especially ecologically, are those things. So the finance guys, the neoliberals, they're allied to the professional managerial classes who have the bullshit jobs. Those guys, they're willing to do something about climate change, but they want to make sure it's on the backs of the poor, right? It's like the Macron solution. More austerity. That's our idea for everything. On the other hand, it's the construction guys who support the populist right. They're the fascists. And if you look at them, extractive industries, of course, and if you look at like what's happening around the world, I suddenly realized that a large part of the reason why you have this continual growth of energy use, continual growth of material production, even though we're supposed to be shifting to a virtual sort of economy, more and more stuff is produced all the time and is having incredible destructive effect, is a lot of this is construction projects, and a lot of it is like these crazy white elephant stuff, which doesn't actually do anything. They put up, take Putin. Classic right-wing populist, right? He comes out of a party founded by this guy, Mayor Lushkov from Moscow, who was famous for putting up whole sections of the city, like office blocks going on for blocks on end, without anything to do with it. You just build this stuff and then try to fill it. So of course, make up bullshit jobs. And you know, Ahmadi, that's an example. He's like people called him the Rush Limbaugh of Iran. Again, right, in working class populace. He built whole sections of Tehran, which is like, and then he tried to get people to live there. You know, no one did.
Exactly.
So
exactly. We've got a million empty buildings in the UK, and yet we're building all these new buildings that are taking up a lot of the Earth's resources, and we have a million buildings empty there that should be used for homes, community centres, projects, self-employed business stuff.
And they're knocking down the one you already have, and building new stuff. And someone pointed out that if you just look at waste, right? You know, they're constantly trying to moralize and say it's your individual fault, you need to recycle more. Actually, the vast majority of waste in landfills is construction waste. And if they just like stopped knocking down buildings and building new ones and just rehab the ones we have, that would have more effect than if everybody recycled everything in their own homes. In fact, we'll have twice as much effect. Okay, so the construction industry is all over the world is supporting this kind of right-wing, nativist, populist, racist politics. And they're the ones who are doing the climate denial. So that's our target, I think, politically. We need to think about that. And how, what are the policies of support? Because, you know, they can't do this without government support. You know, creating these gigantic, for example, in London, the way the tax system is set up, if you rip down a building and build a new one, you get a tax break. But if you rehab an old one, you don't.
What? It really is topsy-turvy. So, you know, and especially now, like Mandrika was saying earlier, we need policies that are going to work in harmony with the earth, like the new New Zealand Prime Minister's bringing in, you know, to actually stop funding fossil fuels and start putting the money into the renewable energy projects. And construction is one of the largest things that affects the environment. And, you know, we really need to look at the carbon footprint of the, you know, of the construction industry and how we can make it more sustainable. Mandrika, yes, come in there.
May I just add that we were in Melbourne, in Collins Street over Christmas, and the construction and all the buildings of towers, big, you know, story towers, are sitting empty. So the same thing there.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's happening all over the world.
We were like, "What's going on? Why are all these street after street, good streets that are just sitting empty with all these towers?"
Yeah, exactly. And people aren't talking about this. Like, what is the structure that's encouraging people?
Yeah.
We need to look into this. And this is something we can stop, which, you know, I call it the bullshit jobs and the batshit construction. It makes no sense. And then there's some economic infrastructure or, you know, political infrastructure which is supporting this. Yeah. And if we got rid of that, I mean, that would like bring us a considerable way towards zero carbon without actually crimping anybody's life. It would actually improve people's lives.
Yeah, I think it's happening globally now that I think about when we stopped off in Iceland. There's a lot of construction, a new construction happening in Iceland, and it doesn't really suit the indigenous people that are there. It's totally opposite. Feels like the opposite kind of to the way they live. So anyway, I'm just agreeing with you that this is happening, and the same thing in Scotland. No, it wasn't Scotland. I think it was Dublin. Well, once you come out of the Dublin on the foreshores there, you go in and there's all this big construction around the waterfront.
It's going on all over the world. I mean, near the Grenfell.
Unrecognizable architecture, and it's just like
it's some hideous stuff that is just.
It looks like it's not going to last either. Truly, it feels like it's going to be there for 10 years. And boom, you know, leaky buildings or bendy bits here. I don't really know. I don't know.
But I think you're probably right.
It is a problem all over the world. I mean, we got over near the Grenfell Tower where the terrible fire was. There's some big buildings, tall blocks. They're called ghost towers. And basically, friends have talked about them. And it's literally these ghost towers that have got about 300 apartments in them. And there's only 4 lights on within those 300 apartments because so many people are buying property just as a speculation, land banking, just leave so that the money doubles up over the years or whatever it is. And you know, so much of that's going on, and we really need some real housing solutions. I think later in the show we've got Jules and Tim coming on talking about hemp housing solutions. I think he's got a major project that's getting a few millions in funding or something to build houses out of hemp, which obviously we're talking about the construction industry. That is, hemp is, biodegradable, it's reusable, it's, food, fiber, fuel and medicine. David, and any other solutions you think we should be focused on? Economic, social,
Mandriga made a very good point. Yeah, I think Mandriga made a very good point that these buildings seem to be designed to be flimsy and fall apart. I think that is another issue that we should be thinking about, that, capitalism as it now exists, since it constantly has to sell you more stuff, is building stuff which is designed to fall apart. And most of the products that we have, here I have my iPhone, everybody's amazed that I'm still using it like I've had it for 2 years. Your things are supposed to die after 3 years. Your computer's supposed to die after 3 years. And this is, think about it, this is the most insane thing to do from an ecological perspective. If we try to understand why we're still producing more and more stuff, even though we don't really need to be, well, that's why. They're just artificially creating needs by making things designed to break. And that could be easily addressed. Again, it would be a way that we'd obviously be improving people's lives rather than causing them to sacrifice. Why not just pass a law saying that anybody who sells you a computer has to replace it for 20 years if it breaks? Then they'll start building computers that don't
that comes into
how to do it.
The circular economy. That's a brilliant idea. I mean, I think there's been things that if you manufacture it, you at the end of its life cycle have to take it back and either upcycle, recycle, or put it into the next process. What we need is more of a circular economy solution where if these companies think they can just produce, and then at the other end, that computer, those chairs, that whatever gets thrown out to a rubbish dump in the UK or Africa or China or around the world, they don't care about the other end of it. But if the law says you are responsible for the life cycle of this product from beginning to end, they're going to think about how it's going to get used and thrown out the other end. One of the nice circular economy, I like one bit of a building solution is the square bottle was produced. I think it might have been one of the big beer manufacturers, but they produced it. And the idea was that you could drink your square bottle of whatever it was, a beer, and then you could use it with some cement to build a house. So they actually became bricks. All of the bottles, rather than 2,000 round recycled bottles, they actually had 2,000. Yeah, exactly like that. And you they get the cement and you build a house. Fantastic. Okay, so we got a few other sections to show, but David, economically, you're involved with Occupy, and the 1%, the 99%. What would be some of the top economic solutions or ways that we could shift? There's a lot of talk about system change solutions. How do you think we can actually start to work on getting these system change solutions? I mean, one of the things, people's assemblies, citizen assemblies all over to start to design that future. But any further solutions you think we should chat about or focus on?
I think there's a bunch of things we're going to have to completely reimagine. I mean, ultimately, capitalism isn't going to work as a way of solving ecological crisis. But in the medium term, I would say we need to look at how we think about money. We're in a very interesting economic moment right now.
Low battery.
Since 2008, the basic fundamentals of how economies work has really shifted in a lot of ways. But the rhetoric people use is still this sort of weird 19th, mid-20th century way where, we got to fight inflation, we have to cut government spending, austerity. I mean, actually, the way things are actually working is exactly the opposite of that. And it creates a divide that people on TV, the talking heads, have to use one economic logic, and the guys in the Bank of England or, who are actually managing things use a completely different one. So they're like, we can't have too much government spending or it'll create inflation. Meanwhile, or we can't just print money. Meanwhile, in the banks, the sort of technocrats, the bureaucrats are sitting there saying, okay, can we print enough money to create a little inflation because there isn't enough? They're actually that's what quantitative easing really meant. They're just throwing money into the economy, hoping to create inflation, because if you don't have any inflation, rich people don't have any reason to invest their money, and therefore the economy slows down. So the problem that they have is exactly the opposite of what they admit. We're going into a new economic moment. Technology production is getting better and better, so the demand for labor in industry is going down. However, more and more demand for labor in care. So the economy is shifting. We're shifting to a care economy. And we need to revalue things. One of the things that I discovered in my research on bullshit jobs is that the financial and economic system is set up. The more obviously your work benefits other human beings, the less you get paid. The people who get the big money are actually usually damaged. But people who actually help others, nurses, teachers,
wages for housework. I think something comes up later in the show.
Yeah. Then people who
wages for housework and all these things aren't valued that actually are very important jobs, caring for people and
So I think we should revalue, think about how we value things. So we need to think about the role of money, which just isn't what we say. But the role of money is part of a larger system of value, which is completely warped. And we need to start over again. I actually suggested at one point, I still think this would be a good idea. We talk about production and consumption as being the two key variables. Economies are based on the relation between them: how much we produce, how much we consume, how do we distribute the stuff we produce to the consumers, right? But I say, those terms almost guarantee a ecologically destructive system. Why don't we shift what we consider to be the basis of value in our societies? Instead of production and consumption, I propose care and freedom.